I will preface this presentation by saying that this is my first reading of Orley Farm, and that I have read no more than our Lord and Master has mandated. So it's just going to be a straight narrative. I'll structure the talk into two strands: the court case and the older generations, the first, and the second, the younger generation. So starting with the court case and the older generation strand, and that starts in chapter 32. As Furnivall asked him to do in chapter 25, Crabwitz goes to Hamworth under a pseudonym and stays at lodgings owned by Dockwrath in Paradise Row. He meets the man and sounds out the business of Orley Farm over several evenings, giving his opinion that it was better left alone, and going so far as to offer Dockwrath £1,000 to do so. Dockwrath is too full of his own righteousness to go along with this, and refuses, but goes away with certain suspicions which come out later. Then he hurries to the offices of Round and Crook to interview Bridget Bolster, one of the witnesses to the codicil and therefore crucial to the case. Only he is not allowed to exchange a word with the woman. Round insists on taking her deposition alone. He returns and reports to Mr. Mason, who is also there, and Dockwrath that she swore she had only witnessed one document, and that once in her life, and that document was a partnership. The news exalts Dockwrath, reinforces Mason's determination to see the matter through, though it rather depresses Round, who would like to be rid of it all. As they make their way to Stationer Hotel, Dockwrath continues what he had started while the deposition was being taken: the poisoning of Mason's mind with the suspicion that it was Round and Crook who had commissioned the offer of £1,000 to drop the case. In Hamworth, Crabwitz had chosen as his pseudonym the name of Cook, which lacks only one letter to make the name Crook, as in Round and Crook. Merely stating one name would suggest the other to a man so involved in the case as Dockwrath. Crabwitz reports back to Furnivall about his trip to Hamworth and meetings with Dockwrath. He is convinced of Lady Mason's guilt. Furnivall will not hear of it, but when left alone in his room, can see no way past the same conclusion. Yet she must be defended because she is beautiful, because she draws on every manly instinct to protect a woman in distress. So he goes to Mr. Chaffanbrass. If any man could secure the acquittal of a guilty person under extraordinary circumstances, it would be Mr. Chaffanbrass. This is an intriguing conversation. Chaffanbrass probes, utters no opinion on the innocence or otherwise of the lady, and, to Furnivall's frequent protestations of her beauty and sweetness, considers those qualities only from the point of view of their effect on the judge, jury, and public. But it's obvious that Chaffanbrass too thinks her guilty. The numbers in this camp are growing by the day. Chaffanbrass will want an assistant. Solomon Aram? Isn't he Jewish? Asked Furnivall. Wouldn't it be better to get Felix Graham? Chaffanbrass will not hear of this. What if the young man changes his mind about her innocence? He'd throw her over in a flash. There's no such fickleness about Aram. What's the significance of this ethnic identification? Furnivall's main objection to using Aram doesn't seem to be that he is Jewish, but that he is famous for getting off individuals that most people consider to have been guilty, so that employing him would be tantamount to an admission of guilt. Is the Jewishness then merely the addition of a certain shadiness to the character? Another question: how many lawyers do you need? Sir Peregrine asks, why should I not? That is, why should he not ask Lady Mason to be his wife? He knows it will invite ridicule and mockery, but he is willing to march on through all that to the happiness of standing with her at the altar. He first consults Lady Orme, who is taken aback, but whose sympathies overrule the rational objection she would otherwise put forward. She gives her consent. Trollope comments. She was very weak, it will be said. Yes, she was weak. Many of the sweetest, kindest, best of women are weak in this way. It is not every woman who can bring herself to say hard, useful, wise words in opposition to the follies of those they love best. A woman to be useful and wise no doubt should have such power. For myself, I'm not sure that I like useful and wise women. Then Sir Peregrine, in the absence of a useful and wise woman, speaks to Lady Mason. She is not surprised, though she must feign to be. She does not want this honour, though hardly knows how to refuse it, and in the end does not refuse it. She has misgivings. Mr. Furnivall, for one. The spell she exercises over him will be broken at once. It can only work if there is the faintest possibility of a prize, and this marriage will remove that. Her son, who seems already estranged, will not react well. She is even concerned with Sir Peregrine. What of the disgrace if the trial goes badly? Lady Mason has used her considerable charms with the innocence of a dove and the cunning of a serpent, but cannot avert the greatest danger of such charms, the difficulty of tempering their potency to what is useful, of keeping them within the bounds of their intended ends. Lucius learns the next day by means of a letter what his mother has done. Already embittered and distracted by her turning to others for support, he now feels the same sort of anger which Joseph Mason had felt when his father had married again. This is the second time that Lucius's character has been compared to that of his half-brother. The first was in chapter 27, as far as I can remember. This new affront to his self-esteem is a severe blow, and the name and image of Sophia Furnivall come to mind almost as a replacement of the mother, a sequence of thoughts that would provoke an "I told you so" or 10 from her Dr. Freud. He is visited by another outraged son, or rather grandson, in the person of young Peregrine. Still smarting from his rejection by Madeline Staveley, his anger is now turned on the woman who has bewitched his grandfather, one whose motives he deeply suspects. Lucius defends his mother, at least in this, but doesn't know how he can possibly change her mind as Peregrine requests, separated as they are by the distance between Orley Farm and the Cleeve, a distance that he refuses to cover with such a quest. Young Peregrine had come home full of Madeline Staveley's rejection, but this is now pushed into second place. When his mother tells him the news, he is unable to raise his objections at once. He needs time to ruminate. But when offered the opportunity to do so by Lady Mason's unexpected appearance in the drawing room, takes it and speaks to great effect. Not at first, mind you. His presentation of Lucius's disapproval does not gain him ground. He tries another tack. We have not been given an opportunity to admire Peregrine's eloquence. As we saw when he proposed to Madeline Staveley, he doesn't have any. And indeed, the words he uses with Lady Mason would never grace any manual on rhetoric. But not only are they the expression of a young man like that, are they the expressions that a young man like Peregrine would use, they are also evocative and effective. If it was your father and he had been at the top of the tree all his life, how would you like to see him get a fall and be laughed at as though he were in the mud just when he was too old ever to get up again? The prospect of Sir Peregrine's humiliation before the people of the district goes straight to Lady Mason's heart. She cedes Peregrine victory at once, somewhat to his own surprise, and promises to speak to his grandfather. The warm feelings engendered by this success carry over to the meal and the postprandial port, and rather than telling his mother, as he had originally intended, it is to his grandfather that Peregrine reveals first his regard for Madeline Staveley, and then the rejection of his proposal. Sir Peregrine is very pleased with his grandson's choice, not at all deterred by her rejection, and insists that he must try again. He and Lady Staveley are pursuing the same strategy independently. But perhaps a more important development of the story happens next. Mr. Furnivall, who comes down to the Cleeve to inform Sir Peregrine of the involvement in the case of Chaffanbrass and Aram, which alarms the old man, himself learns of the upcoming nuptials. He is not pleased, and for precisely the reasons that Lady Mason had anticipated. The last chapter in this strand and in the section takes place inside Mr. Furnivall's head and in his happy home. The man is furious. Jealousy works its dark magic on him. Lady Mason, to whom all could be forgiven before, is now a snake and worthy of no consideration whatsoever. Her conniving has betrayed his trust and threatened to bring down ridicule on the head of a man he respects. As if that were not enough, when he goes home, he finds Mrs. Briggs there. She has been bringing back what she has learned from her cousin, the rumours about him and Lady Mason. Mrs. Furnivall is thus well primed. The clash is inevitable, is ugly, and separation looks imminent. We learn in this chapter that Martha Briggs is second cousin to Mr. Crook's brother's wife. That is, Mr. Crook of Round and Crook, so she has a fruitful source of news. There are a lot of relations in this novel. The second strand, the younger generation, and here I jump back to chapter 27, which is the first in the section. Noningsby does seem to be a very happy place. It was so over Christmas when we were able to compare it to 3 other houses, and it continues to be now. For one thing, it is full of happy children, and a more solid basis for general contentment can hardly be found. And the children are happy because they are involved. In fact, it is the house rule that all activities must be regulated so that the children can be involved. Thus, on this particular evening, they play a card game called Commerce, which, I must say, would exclude this child who doesn't understand it at all. Nor, it seems, does Lucius Mason. Rather, he understands the rules, but does not in any way partake of the spirit of the thing. This is in part because he's a heavy-browed man for whom serious things are deadly serious and light-hearted things happen elsewhere. It is also because of an exchange of letters between him and his mother in which she has announced her intention of staying at the Cleeve and therefore of not leaning on his shoulders during this time of crisis. He takes this badly. And so when he leaves the card table, to no one's regret, I'm sure, and sits by the table with Sophia Furnivall, he unburdens himself to her sympathetic ears. She listens, tries to reassure, and is able to promise her support in such a way that he believes in it. They touch hands to seal the promise, for he is leaving the next day. Lady Staveley is sorry to see Lucius go, not because he has added to the sum of her happiness, but because he was a barrier between Sophia Furnivall and her besotted son, Augustus. Sophia would be, to Lady Staveley's mind, most unsuitable, a match to be averted at all costs. Not that Sophia has encouraged the young Staveley. She is aware of the danger and is clear-eyed about this as she is about most things. For instance, after she and Lucius touched hands, she went upstairs at once so that bedtime would appear to be the significance of the gesture in the eyes of those watching, eyes of which Lucius was entirely unaware. And then, of course, there is the hunt. As we have seen in so many of Trollope's novels, the quarry is always a fox, but may also be seated atop a horse in the habit of a sportsman or woman. Peregrine Orme's quarry is Madeline Staveley. He swears he will strike up a real conversation with her before the day is out, a conversation that would begin to establish an intimacy that would be conducive to a proposal. He fails. We have just seen Lucius Mason fall into such an intimacy with Sophia without trying. And now we see Felix Graham riding alongside Madeline fall into easy banter with her, while Peregrine is as tongue-tied as a spotty adolescent. You might expect this to engender jealousy on his part. It doesn't. Trollope explains. He knew he could be no fit match for Miss Staveley. It was not jealousy that tormented him so much as diffidence in his own resources. Does Trollope mean that Peregrine is not right for her, or that he's not worthy of her? We are introduced to the Tristram sisters here, 2 avid hunters that more than keep up with the men, and of whom we shall no doubt hear more later. But now their role is to lead Felix Graham into his doom. There is a difficult ditch, which Julia Tristram takes easily, Peregrine a little less so, but Felix not at all. He comes down badly, breaking an arm and 2 ribs. Trollope notes who stops on such occasions and who doesn't, and then the feelings of the attendant, who cannot leave the fallen nor help in any material way, and is generally reduced to helpless hollowing. Peregrine is in just this position, but acquits himself well. He is cheery and up-hearted, but at the same time gentle and even thoughtful, and behaves in such a way that Felix will never forget it. Peregrine sends a boy for a cart, but the Staveleys arrive first. Madeline's reactions are the strongest, and close to tears, she does what she can to help, all the time under Sophia Furnivall's watchful eye. The men manage to get him back over the ditch, to the carriage, and so back to Noningsby. To both young men has occurred the idea that it is a silver lining that he might be nursed by Madeline. She does not nurse him. His ministering angel is, in fact, Peregrine, who is kindness itself, but whose mind is mostly occupied with his imminent proposal to Madeline. She is not present in body, but very much so in mind, perhaps too much. In any case, her sister, Isabella Arbuthnot, sees fit to warn her against such displays, indicating Sophia as one who would notice and, by implication, talk. Lady Staveley does not talk, but nor is she keen on the prospect of Felix Graham as a son-in-law. She has, of course, correctly interpreted her younger daughter's behaviour, as well as Peregrine's, a much better prospect, and thinks it a wiser strategy to bring them together. This she does, and he finally pops the word, or rather blurts it out without grace or foreplay, so to speak. Madeline is thunderstruck, quite taken aback, not having imagined anything like this. She can do no more than state and restate her rejection of the proposal. Peregrine replies that he will leave forthwith. It's difficult not to contrast Madeline's unawareness both of how she appears to others and of Peregrine's interest in her, with Sophia Furnival's acute observation of self and others. After Peregrine has vanished, Madeline is thrown entirely and cannot speak. She escapes the evening gathering with the excuse of a headache and heads for her mother's room to await her. As she passes Felix Graham's room, it is opened by the nurse, who ushers her in. They exchange a few polite words, pleasantries, which, however, when she reaches her mother's room, somehow glow in the half-light. Trollope puts it better. She sat there feeding on them, as though they were of a flavour so rich that she could not let the sweetness of them pass from her. Her mother comes. She has, of course, guessed all, and the initial conversation shows it. I can't claim a broad experience of one-to-one mother-daughter conversations, but I found this one utterly convincing. The relation of adult and child is maintained throughout, and not only in the words used. The mother calls the child to her, as if to comfort her physically, and Madeline, in the moment when she wants to tell all, doesn't finish a sentence. Did he tell you that he loved you? Yes, Mum. And you answered him. I could only tell him, yes, I know, poor fellow. Lady Staveley is very understanding and insistent that she would never force her daughter to marry someone she didn't love. But there is something in her tone that betokens opposition to what is obvious will happen. And perhaps a little strongly for Madeline's comfort, she insists on the advantages of the match in a worldly view, so that the daughter goes to her room not confident or reassured, but crestfallen. We have heard of Mary Snow, the young woman that Felix Graham is moulding to be his wife. Now in chapter 33, The Angel of Light, we are introduced to her. I can't help feeling that there is something dismissive about Trollope's treatment in this chapter. First, he deals with Mary Snow's past in a paragraph: drunken father, knightly rescue, solemn vow to marry. And then quotes her letter to her lord-to-be, a copy and paste affair whose dominant position is obligation. Moreover, she surreptitiously receives a letter from someone who does feel something for her, feelings which seem to be returned. Moreover, Augustus has pooh-poohed the entire affair at great length, causing doubt to grow in Graham's mind, a mind already turning upon the soft fall of Madeline's footsteps in the corridor outside his room. And to cap it all, Trollope has already stated his disapproval of such arrangements, complete with instructions of how it should go. Dance with a girl 3 times, and if you like the light of her eyes and the tone of voice with which she, breathless, answers your little questions about horseflesh and music, about affairs masculine and feminine, then take the leap in the dark. And one more thing. The title of the chapter, The Angel of Light, is not picked up from a comment by Felix, let alone one by her duenna, Mrs. Thomas, but is the phrase used of her in the billet doux from The Mystery Lover. So, no tension here about what is going to happen in this relationship. Why then does he include it? As something that Felix Graham must grow out of? As an impediment to be overcome on his road to destined marriage, to his destined marriage? As duty misconceived? These are rhetorical questions and do not expect an answer. No spoilers, please. Madeline Staveley is in that familiar position of a Trollope heroine of not being able to articulate what she is feeling. Her mother knows, and by the end of chapter 39, her brother knows too. It means that the suitability of the match is immediately a question, and the answer from both mother and brother is no. It is definitely not suitable. Augustus doesn't quite say this to Felix, but he doesn't need to. Augustus is the main player in this chapter, first fencing with Sophia Furnival and not coming off too well. She is far too wily for him. And when his mother interrupts, his reaction tells her everything. But Sophia merely passes from one performance to another in such a masterful way that the older woman mutters to herself, "Nasty sly girl," which is a little harsh, but not entirely without foundation. Was Augustus intending to propose, or was this merely lovemaking? I'm not entirely sure. If a proposal was on the cards, it would have been the third in these 14 chapters. Such a match would please Lady Staveley as little as one between Madeline and Felix. She has taken care to make sure that Felix's door is kept firmly shut, but with both son and daughter, there is so much going on that she cannot easily close down. Felix has received a letter from Mary Snow begging forgiveness, though for what she does not say, and from Mary's keeper announcing that all must be told, though she doesn't tell it. He announces that he must leave the next day, but it's not because of this. It's because of Madeline, because of her mother's imputed opposition, and Augustus's failure to deny opposition to the courtship. The household, despite everything, insists that he must not leave so soon. Will he or won't he? Will it matter? What did Mary Snow do? Is the Furnival marriage finished? Will Lady Mason pull out of her engagement? Some of you know, but I don't, and so will not say another word except thank you.